Okay, terrific. Another video today. And me all dolled up for you in a nice shirt for a change. Alright, a few things. Thing number one. Gonna go back on an earlier, I think it might have been the second or the first of these big picture videos. I talked a bit about echoing, and it occurred to me after it'd be better if I could give you an example. I'll probably post this on the web, on the course page somewhere, but this is something a student wrote in the first semester that I taught this class. While the United States' police and military forces have always existed to either maintain law and order or protect us from foreign enemies, with the increased development of weapons and increased violence occurring around the world, the police and military have increased their means of defending its citizens and to accommodate for those changes. This piece acknowledges both sides of the argument whether or not police have in fact become more militarized by their own choice or because the police have need to adjust for a new increased violence in modern society. So it's like 4 increases in a couple of sentences. And the sentences are overlong, and there's problems with that, and that student worked really hard, probably as hard as any student I've ever had, ended up with an A in the class, and the paper was greatly improved. But that's echoing. It's using the same word over and over and over there. Now, be aware, Garner has something that he calls inelegant, hang on a sec, I should have grabbed my Garner, but it's right over here. Inelegant variation, I believe is what he calls it. It's in the guide. Yeah, page 508, 509. And he talks about their sort of the opposite problem, is people jumping around too much. So if you came across that, you'd wonder what I was talking about, echoing on one hand, yet Garner is more all up in himself about inelegant variation. He gives examples of it, talking about Woody Allen, quote from Daily Variety. This is Allen's first directing bid since 1989's Crimes and Misdemeanors. He won the Helming Trophy, directing trophy, or Best Director Oscar, for Annie Hall, and blah, blah, blah. So Garner there is, with his inelegant variation, and he's talking about people changing it up too much. He's usually going to nouns. When people take a noun and then they try to do another noun and another noun to mix it up. Sometimes it's better to just go with the main noun. But for the use of these words, which are adjectives mainly, a lot of times I find anyway, increasing in this case, the repetition can become distracting to the reader. These are matters of style, right? Nothing's grammatically wrong necessarily. Grammar goes to more rules, right, that are less arguing goes on about them. These are matters of style. Style is important, but think of style as a best practice, right? I can give you 2 things that are written, both grammatically correct, both get through Grammarly, no problem, but one is much better written than the other. That's the thing that's going to separate writers at the next level, right? You first climb up to get to a point where you have your grammar together, your mechanics, then you climb up to a point where you stylistically are a good writer. In any event, that's what I wanted to say about echoing. I will endeavor to post something there. So I've got to get through a couple more things here. The next thing is number 7 on the list, is pay attention to detail and follow instructions. And this goes not just for this class, but in general. A lot of life actually turns out to be a reading comprehension test. If you don't read things well, you make mistakes. And following directions. Most of you will go into employment after you graduate, and they will have expectations for you. Your first experience with a work to rules situation should not be your first job. It should be well before that. So I try to hold the line on things. When I say submit in a Microsoft Word document, I mean a Microsoft Word document. I can't deal I will not deal with things that are coming in from Google Docs or what have you. And I have good reasons for that. But you have to follow the rules. Okay, I see people not italicizing names of journal articles. It's unacceptable. And again, you're in a bit tighter spot than other iterations of this course because this is the first time I've taught it for so few students. So I have a much sharper eye for what I've corrected before. I'm going to remember much better than when I have 125 students. Not only am I not the only one doing the editing, very often we switch off from assignment to assignment. So if we have three article summaries, I might grade in your student A, I'll grade your first one. Then I'm going to grade another student's second one in that slot, and another student's, again, the third round, I'm going to grade. I'm not going to see you writing again until I get around the whole course. The whole, we trade off. You don't stay with the same grader on each assignment when we do the big class. So here you've got me again and again and again, and I see the same mistakes again and again and again. And again, it causes me this existential angst. You have to follow directions. And this course is great for that because I give you a lot of directions. In fact, I've cut way back from what it used to be. But for any assignment you get in writing, there's probably going to be guidelines, right? And if you end up, say, a lot of you statistically are likely to go to law school, and then you become a lawyer. Then you have to do things like write briefs and write memos and write letters to clients and so on. And there's forms for all of those things, formats you have to follow, and you have to get good at that stuff. And appellate briefs get kicked out for not, meeting the requirements that the court sets forth. You get malpracticed for that stuff. It begins to really, really matter. So I tend not to penalize on grade if people mess up this stuff, but I really need to bang the drum hard on this and say that if you do a writing assignment, and it could be grammatically solid, and it could be well reasoned, and it could be well organized, and it could be interesting, but if you don't follow the format that you're assigned to, if you don't submit it in the right way, if you don't follow the rules, then you're not going to get listened to. And it seems senseless to waste all this effort writing things that don't get proper attention because people see that you didn't follow the instructions, didn't follow the details. I've routinely had students hand in assignments, particularly early in the semester, with nothing to do with what I assigned. They just didn't understand the rules, right? I had a student one semester hand in not 3 article summaries, but 3 court opinion briefs. They read the briefing section of the syllabus or something, and court opinion briefing was an assignment some semesters, and they hand me, and it's nothing to do with the substance of what I'm looking for. So that ends up being a real problem. So you need to be aware of that stuff and on top of that stuff. I've got to move it on here. Don't hedge, qualify. Students do this. In your writing, people tend to hedge. All right, they pack their writing full of these words and fluff that they're not willing to say that they're not willing to stand behind what they're writing. Examples of hedging words: almost, apparently, fairly, in part, nearly, partially, predominantly, presumably, rather, really, relatively, right? Seemingly, so to speak, somewhat, sort of, to a certain degree. You get the idea here. To some extent, I would argue. So when you have words like virtually and so on in virtually every case. The writer's hedging. They don't want to commit to something, or they're afraid that they'll be caught with that one exception and so on. But it makes the writing soft and amorphous and anodyne, dull, numbing, is what that word means. And you probably use these terms every day in your writing and in your speaking, right? All else being equal in general. If someone tells you Liz wants to move out of Seattle because it's a rainy city, you know not to interpret that as 365 days a year, 24 hours a day, it rains in Seattle. It's just more rain than average, right? People understand and compensate for these things, but people write as if they never do. An adversary unscrupulous enough to give you no quarter with an exception like that is not going to be listening to your arguments anyway. There's no sense in pandering to those people. Of course, and I have to say, sometimes you have no choice but to hedge a statement. But then you don't want to hedge in that case. What you want to do is qualify. Spell out the circumstances where the exception is. Don't just wave your hand at it as you go past. If it matters enough to bring it in, it matters enough to explain it. Again, definitions and examples are useful here. I'll also say, too, that there are, for example, legal, if you do go to law school, if you do want to be a lawyer, right? For drafting things like contracts, yeah, then we do go into all of those hedging positions, and we try to evaluate all the possibilities. But for general purpose academic writing, that's not how we do it. As long as you're not misrepresenting things, particularly with statistics, then you don't want to be hedging. Again, qualify things. That's the way good writers do it. Last thing here, and I'm running out of time, so I'll be quick with it, but I've already touched on it a few different times. It's the importance of proofreading, and I talked about proofreading twice to get your redundancies out and so on, but I didn't talk enough about the proofreading at the front end. And really the biggest tips for proofreading, beyond practice, and I've gotten a lot of practice, I've gotten fairly sharp at it. The more you do, the better you get at it. The thing about it is it's the putting it aside if you're proofreading your own work, and it's always better to have someone else do it. If they're smart and good at it, then definitely they're going to see things you're going to miss. The brain makes corrections. You can look at a sentence that you wrote and it looks perfectly fine to you because you know in your head what it's supposed to say, but it doesn't actually say that on the page. Someone who isn't you reading that will catch it. But the way you can get better at catching that is if you put what you're writing aside, and that turns the whole mission of being a good writer into being a good time manager. If you're handing in assignments at 10 minutes to the deadline, I know you didn't have time to proofread it. Right? If I see a paper coming in my inbox at 11:50 p.m. when the deadline's 11:59, I know it's not proofread, and it shows. The key is to do it early enough that you have the time to put it aside, put it in a drawer, as they say, for a day. You get fresh eyes when you look at it again, and it makes all the difference in the world. Again, a stunningly obvious, not particularly interesting truth that you will completely miss if you don't listen to what I'm saying. This class gives you more valuable information than any other class you'll take at UMass. This gives you more useful stuff you will keep using again and again for the rest of your career. But if you are passive as you listen, you're not going to get it. That's the key. You've got to listen here. Proofreading is important. The best way to do it is to get ahead on your work, put it in a drawer for a day, and then look at it. Better still have someone else read it, or best yet, do all three things. That's my time for this one. I'll be back shortly with another.